Hi, welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. Everything's been a little bit crazy in my life, my work, and this channel over the last couple of weeks. So I haven't quite been keeping the kind of rhythm that I'd like. I have been putting out videos, but just not the ones that I would normally be aiming for. And one of the ones I've been missing are kind of my news reviews and industry analysis videos. I'm going to try and get back into that now and starting today. So this is a look back at watch media stuff I've noticed over the last month, so in September, but it's really focused, to be honest, on the last maybe 2 weeks. And it's things I haven't seen a lot of other people talking about, albeit that they're in the media. So the first thing is, I'm not sure, this feels like some self-promotion, but obviously I did a podcast with the guys from Scottish Watches, so I'd direct anyone from my channel to go check that out. Even if you feel like you've heard me more than enough, go check out the guys from Scottish Watches. There will be a link below. They bring a really fun, a really different way of looking at watches, looking at the industry, and yeah, I cannot recommend them highly enough. I should also massive thanks to Rick and Ricky. Having me on the podcast has been enormously beneficial for this channel. I've picked up a whole bunch of more subscribers out of that, so thank you very much, guys. And since I'm here, I'll take the opportunity to say, hit the little bell, hit the little subscribe button and the bell icon, please. The channel has taken a real boost in the last couple of days. It'd be great to keep that going. Okay, now the next thing in the watch media over the last couple of weeks, in fact, this was just in the last few days, and this is one I think everyone who is into watches should listen to. Now, it's another podcast, and it's on the Worn and Wound site, and they've had an interview with Ming and one of the other guys from his brand, his eponymous brand, Ming, talking about where the watch brand came from and where they're going, and a whole bunch of other things. And it's a fascinating interview about the brand Ming. But even if they're not your watches, even if you're thinking to yourself, I'll never buy a Ming, they're just whatever, still listen to it, because in this podcast, Ming lets us behind the scenes of a lot of the real nitty gritty of what it takes to get a watch up. How long it takes to properly design a watch, how that concept works. He starts to even pull back the curtain a bit on things like, how do you talk to case builders about having your case specified, and having to make decisions about whether you're going to have a 15 or a 10 micron interior corner radius on a watch case, which makes a difference between a corner that looks a little bit dull and a corner that looks lovely and crisp. He talks about how those simple decisions can make the difference between whether you get your cases in a few weeks, a few months, or a year or more. Really fascinating insight behind the curtain of trying to get watches made. And I cannot recommend highly enough that anyone who's interested in watches and the industry side of what it takes to bring one to market, go listen to that podcast. Moving away from podcasts and into videos, I'd recommend people go check out the Monochrome site. This month, Monochrome did sort of a take apart and analysis of what goes into making the thinnest chronograph mechanical movement in the world. That's the one that's in the new Bulgari Octo Finissimo chronograph GMT. It's an amazing movement. It was in my sort of Ask Me Anything. Someone asked me about, you know, what some of the movements that excite me as an engineer. This is one, and seeing how they've made it and seeing how they've engineered it is really interesting. So I'd recommend people go check that one out. Changing gears completely down to the other end of the market, what I want to do is point you towards a pretty simple, unpretentious, talking hands video from Random Bob, where he's done a review of the Mido Ocean Star Titanium. It's an okay video, it's a good solid review, but the real reason I want people to go look at it is because he's reviewing a watch that doesn't get a lot of love, but I think it deserves to. I've tried this watch on, the Mido Ocean Star Titanium. I really like it. I have not held it long enough to do any kind of review on it. Also, whilst I like it, it's not really my thing. It doesn't fit into my collection, so I'm not going to buy it. But I think it's a watch that doesn't get enough coverage. So Bob does have one. He has done a good review on it, and so I'm going to highlight it as something that people should go check out to see a watch that isn't covered by everybody else and is really quite good and interesting. Changing gears completely from a small YouTube channel doing an unusual brand that doesn't get a whole lot of love, now I'm going to switch gears and recommend you go look at a blog to watch. One of the biggest watch reviews and watch channels in the world, at least in our little part of it. And Ariel Adams is doing a short 2.5-minute review of, you will never guess, the Movado Museum Dial Red Label. Now this is an $1,800 fashion watch, and he likes it. He thinks it's a good watch, well made, decent value. He recognizes that Movado has got an enormous amount of ground to make up in trying to rehabilitate its reputation, but it is interesting to me that they're clearly trying to. I don't imagine that Ariel simply walked into his local mall and picked up a Movado and said, oh, we should talk about this. I strongly suspect someone from Movado reached out and said, we have this watch, would you like to review it? That's fine. Every company does that. There's nothing wrong with it. Nor is there anything wrong with Ariel. In fact, there's a lot right with Ariel looking at the watch on its merits and doing a straight review. For me, it is interesting because it begins to ask the question of, is Movado thinking about changing who they are? Movado have a solid history. Movado in fact, they have a very good history. They could be so much more than they've allowed themselves to be. Is this the beginning of Movado thinking it can be more than it has been recently? Another really interesting thing that came up in the media it's been playing out over the last week was, in fact, probably over the last 2 weeks, was an American footballer, someone Odell Jr., who knows he plays football, he's American. But the most famous thing was he was seen playing football wearing $250,000 Richard Mille. Turns up a couple of days later wearing a potentially $2 million Richard Mille. That turns out to be fake. And then 3 days later, he announces that he's now a brand ambassador for Daniel Wellington, and how Daniel Wellington watches are so much better than Richard Mille watches. There was a lot of discussion in there about what the hell was going on. Really fascinating, pulling apart an analysis of everything that's gone on here in the Hodinkee website. And the author there has really pulled this apart and come up with the idea that we were played, that this was an incredibly elaborate series of events that was always intended to play out broadly according to this theme. Really interesting take. Makes the footballer at the centre of this far less of a kind of a clueless fool and much more of a Machiavellian manipulator. If not him, then his management, or someone involved in this. So a really interesting article, a really powerful example of how some of these new watch brands like Daniel Wellington are just running rings around the traditional watch manufacturers when it comes to using social media and influencers. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing and it's where I want watch marketing to go, but it's still a fascinating piece and I suggest you will go read it. Now, I want to finish up with some pretty quick and dirty analysis of one of the most interesting things that's happened in the whole watch media landscape this year, which was the TGV link up with Watchbox. This relationship fired up in May. It's now the end of September, so we've got about 4 months under our belt to find out what this is going to look like. And I think After some initial awkwardness, we kind of know what it is. He's mostly just continued doing what he was doing beforehand, just with some better watches and some slightly increased production service. And obviously that byline now powered by Watchbox. After those initial meetings, meet and greet type things on screen with Tim, it all looked very awkward, and I think all of us thought this was probably not going to work. Then TGV had yet another one of his plagiarism scandals, nicely spotted by the guys at Scottish Watches, and it looked like this was destined for the rocks. It seemed to recover. They seemed to get their feet under them, and then suddenly, I think it was about a month ago, maybe about 3 weeks ago, Watch WikiLeaks get a leaked message from apparently inside the Watchbox Studios community workforce, talking about how unhappy everyone was with TGV coming on board, how this had been done without any consultation with the team, there was a lot of friction, and that this was destined to die. And frankly, when I first heard that, I think if you go back and look at one of my videos, I make a sort of a flippant comment like, it looks like TGV's inability to learn from his past mistakes was going to bring him down, and that maybe everyone was right that Watchbox were going to have to cut ties with him. A month down the track, that doesn't seem likely. He's still out there and about, still getting powered by Watchbox, still obviously getting pieces from Watchbox to review. It would appear from the way that the production's being done, he still gets production support. And yet we were told that this was going to be dissolving quite quickly. What do I think's going on? Well, I think I have to sort of have a mea culpa. I suspect that, like everyone else, when that first sort of Watch WikiLeaks thing came out, we all kind of took it at face value. And we all said, well, you know, it sounds like we all expected TGV and Watchbox to break up. And so this confirmed our expectations, and I think we sort of reviewed it fairly uncritically. In retrospect, that may not have been appropriate. In retrospect, I think there could be some more interesting analysis of what's going on within that Watchbox Studios team. I suspect the parts of that message which were saying that there was a lot of disquiet and there was no consultation with the Watchbox content team when TGV was brought in, I believe that's absolutely true. But having decided that, I think now we have to look critically at everything else that was said. Watchbox makes its money by selling watches. The first thing that is very important to Watchbox, its number one line of advertising, are the Watchbox reviews that Tim Mosso runs. So Watchbox Studios, the YouTube channel that runs the educational type stuff, is really a way of gathering a market to support the Watchbox reviews channel in selling Watchbox's videos. That's kind of the circle. You go watch the Watchbox Studio, that encourages you to look at the reviews encourage you to buy watches. That's the way it works. Except it wasn't really working. Watchbox Studios' work didn't seem to be wasn't growing itself, and didn't seem to be growing new views of Watchbox review videos. And if you look at the social blade numbers for those going back over several months or even years, you can see that it's all fairly steady as she goes. There's not much going on in that space. There's not much going on in that space, at least until May this year. And in May this year, views of Watchbox reviews spike. There's a drop off fairly quickly, but they then come back to far higher levels and far faster growth than they've had in their history. So what happened in May that might have change the direction of how people looked at Watchbox reviews? And the answer is obvious. TGV joined the team. Now, think of this. Watchbox Studio's purpose for being is to encourage more people to review or to watch Watchbox review videos. They were failing at that. They were not generating the kind of buzz that that organization is intended to do. Suddenly, apparently without consultation, Watchbox management bring in an outside influencer, if you like, to shake things up. And that succeeds. The views that Watchbox Studios had failed to deliver suddenly come on tap immediately after TGV comes on board. Now, whether you like him or not, whether you think he steals material or not, whether you think he's a pretentious little prat or not, those numbers can't be ignored. And as far as the Govbergs go, that's success. That's what he was hired to do. Now, can you imagine how pissed people within the Watchbox Studios content creation would be? How angry would you be if your job had been to get people in to look at another channel? Your bosses did not have faith in you, brought in an outside influencer without consulting you, and then bloody hell, it works. How pissed would you be? How tempted would you be to leak against that influencer? I think the Watch WikiLeaks guys absolutely got an insider leak. I think they got an insider leak from someone who was highly motivated to leak against TGV because they were pissed that they'd been shown up. So given all this obvious antagonism between the influencer that the Govbergs brought in and the Watchbox Studio content producers, I'm pretty confident that parts of that email that spoke about changes ahead and that things are going to, get shaken up is also absolutely true. I'm just not sure if those changes are the ones that everyone assumed was going to happen. I'm not sure if those changes are necessarily what we in the media all assumed, and that was that TGV would get the flick. The numbers, now I don't have an idea of what's happening with sales, so it could be that if you go one step further and look at that, you could find out there could be no evidence that increased views of the Watchbox reviews is having any influence on sales. There might even be a negative influence, in which case all bets are off. I'm completely wrong, and I'm going to look like a goose in a little while. But none of us have that data. We can only talk about the data we have. And the data we have contradicts the general feeling that TGV has been a negative. The data we have would seem to indicate bringing him on had an initial positive reaction and is continuing to have a positive reaction. And if there's going to be changes in the Watchbox world, and if you want changes in the Watchbox world, the odds are they're not going to be to the TGV relationship. Oh, and one more thing, I completely forgot. There's another really interesting video that I think you should go check out. Watchfinder, one of probably my single favorite dealer-based information channel on YouTube, mainly because I think they do a really good job of separating their job of selling. Probably this is where I think Watchbox fails. You watch Watchbox and you know that everything they're doing is about selling you a watch. You don't get that same feeling with Watchfinder. The Watchfinder video they did this month on Breitling, in about 8 minutes they do this fantastic sort of history of Breitling, history of the chronomat, history of the Navitimer, and then have a really nuanced look at what has gone on over the last year with the creation of the Navitimer 8, the withdrawal of that name, and then the reissue of the watches now as I think it's the Aviator. I think it is a I actually think it's a very nuanced look at a brand that is trying to find a new way, that has struggled with the new watch economy, and is now actively and really dynamically trying to find a new way. So go check that one out. There'll be a link below, and I should have a screenshot of it up in front of me. So that's it. I've been Pete McConville. This has been my look back at September and sort of the most interesting things I've seen on the watch, in the watch media, and things I think shouldn't be allowed to go past unknown. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you think my analysis is completely wrong, if you think that there's other stories going on, if you think that there's something I've missed. I'm really interested to know. If you wait a little while, a card will come up with my Instagram handle. Please go over there and follow me. You'll notice I don't do wristwatch checks. If you want to know what I'm wearing and what's in the collection, go check that out. If you want to get in contact with me, there's an email address. Please subscribe to the channel. I am inching closer to my first goal of 1,000 subs, and I can only get there with your help. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. I'll catch you later. Bye.